Hi, everybody, and welcome back to this week's lecture. What we're going to do is we're going to continue with part two. And what we're going to try to do is we're going to go ahead and try to visually recognize and verbally describe the three remaining types of tissues. We're going to be looking at connective tissues, muscle tissues, as well as the nervous tissues. Now, one thing I do want to mention is this is going to be kind of an overview of these three different types. Whenever you move on to anatomy and physiology, you are going to go into these three different types in much more detail and in much more complexity. So in this case, for our class, we're just going to do an overview to kind of understand exactly what these are going to be, what the functions are, and where they're going to be located. But again, you are going to explore this in much more depth whenever you go to anatomy and physiology. So one of the very first tissues we're going to look at is going to be our connective tissues. When it comes to our connective tissues, right here, we're going to have two different types. We can have proper, which are going to contain our loose as well as our dense connective tissues. And then we're also going to have our specialized tissues, which are going to contain our bone, our blood, and then our cartilage. Now, one thing that they all have in common is that these are going to connect tissues together as well as provide support. So again, they're going to connect tissues together as well as provide support. So those are going to be the important characteristics when it comes to these connective tissues. There are also going to be multiple different types. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and check out some of those types and look at what they're going to look like underneath the microscope and how they're going to kind of cause that support or cause that connection between each other. So looking at this over here, there are going to be multiple different types, and we do have many different locations and functions for them. I'm going to kind of go over some of these very quickly, and then we're going to go ahead and take a look at a table that's going to do a better job of telling you exactly where the locations are and the functions and exactly what they're going to be. So again, in general, connective tissues have to connect tissues together, as well as provide support. So looking at this, blood is actually going to be a connective tissue. A lot of people kind of overlook that, but it is going to be one. And one of the big reasons why is because it is going to connect a lot of tissues together. Remember, blood is going to supply oxygen and nutrients throughout the entire body. And again, it's going to provide support as well, because again, we have all of these different types of white blood cells that are going to help support and protect the body. Adipose tissue, again, fat cells are going to connect things together. We also have loose and dense fibrous connective tissues providing support and that connection. Cartilage, and then compact bone, again, also providing that connection and that support. So this is going to be the chart that's going to be really important when it comes to that connective tissue, because again, it's going to show you the type of tissue here, the cells associated with that tissue, the fibers, and then the location. So this is definitely going to be an important thing to kind of keep in mind, do whatever you need to do to come back to this in order to identify exactly all again of the different types of connective tissues. So again, we have our loose, our dense, our cartilage, our bone, our adipose, and then our blood. So these are all going to be our connective tissues. You can see all of the associating cells over here. Fibers, so what they're going to be associated with for those tissues. And again, location, which is going to help a lot in order to identify exactly where these kind of connective tissues are going to be located. So I'll give everybody about a couple seconds to pause this and familiarize yourself with these types of tissues. All right, so that actually is going to conclude our connective tissues. Just remember, main thing is connecting other tissues together as well as providing that support. Make sure you are familiarizing yourself with that table because again, it's going to help immensely in identifying those locations and different types. So moving on, now we're going to look at our muscle tissues. So muscle tissues are going to be really, really important and very cool because they're going to allow for movement. And they're going to do that by contracting. So we're going to be pulling things together or relaxing, letting things go back. So we do have three different types of muscles. We have our smooth, our skeletal, and then our cardiac muscles. Now, the way we're going to categorize these are going to be the striations. So it's going to be kind of like bands we can see within the muscle. In this case, smooth is not going to have any striations, just like the name suggests. But our skeletal and our cardiac are going to have those striations. We can define it as well as our nuclei, exactly where it is and how many we have. When it comes to our smooth, we have single and it's going to be in the center. Skeletal are going to be many at the peripheral, meaning the sides. And then our cardiac, again, single in the center again. Now, this is going to be another way to kind of categorize or really understand what type of muscles we're dealing with. We have two different types of controls. We have involuntary controls, which means that we don't need to think about them and they're going to automatically do their job. In this case, we have our smooth muscles, which are going to be our visceral organs. So in this case, whenever you swallow something, your esophagus is just going to go ahead and kind of push that down into your stomach. That's something that you don't actively need to do or actively need to control. Intestines are going to be squeezing a lot of the nutrients throughout in order to absorb it. Again, that is something that the organs are automatically going to do. That is not something that you need to think about or actively do in order to cause that contraction. Same thing with cardiac muscles, which are going to be exclusive to the heart. In this case, they're involuntary. Your heart is going to automatically beat at whatever beats per minute whenever it's experiencing high load and higher demand of oxygen throughout the body. It's going to increase its beats per minute. Again, that's something you don't need to think about. It's automatically going to happen. So both of those are going to be involuntary versus our skeletal muscles are going to be our voluntary. So skeletal muscles are essentially anything you can control, anything that you can do in order to move your skeleton. That means walking, running, moving your arms, grabbing things. All of those are going to be voluntary controls, and they're all going to be eliciting that contraction or relaxation within the skeletal muscles. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the muscle tissues when it comes to this. You can see over here, we have each one of these labeled out. So we not only have the type of muscle, but we also have a definition as to what they're going to be. And then we also have a picture of them right here, as well as what they're going to look like in our microscope. So in this case, we have our skeletal muscles, and you can see in our picture over here that we have those striations. So they're going to be those little lines. So remember, skeletal muscles are going to be long, cylindrical shaped, and prominent striations. So meaning we can really see them. They're also going to have multiple nuclei on the peripheral. So you can see in the picture, we have multiple off to the side. And then when we actually look at a microscope image of it, you can see the nuclei off to the side. Again, we have multiple, and they're going to be all off to the side. And then there will be striations here as well, so you should be able to see them. When it comes to our smooth muscles, they're going to be taped at the end, and they're going to have single nuclei with no visual striations. So over here on the picture over here, you can see we have large nuclei, and then underneath the microscope, you can see we have more of those as well. It's going to be very large. Finally, when it comes to cardiac, they're going to be branching shaped, appear striated, and have a single nuclei, and they're going to be connected via the intercalated discs. So in this case, you can see that they're kind of branching out over here. And you can see that we have those single nuclei. And then in this case, you can see the intercalated discs right over here. Again, kind of separating those pieces out. So again, these are going to be our skeletal muscles, and you can see, again, we have the definitions, or we have the types here with our representations here, as well as those definitions. All right, so our very last type of tissue we're going to look at are going to be our nervous tissues. And they're going to be made up of two things. One, our neurons, as well as our neuroglia tissues, or I'm sorry, cells. So essentially all those mean are neurons are going to be the ones that are actively going to be sending signals. They're going to be sending electrical impulses or transmitting and receiving them throughout the body. So these are going to be our neurons right over here. And then you can see them here, here, here. And again, they're responsible for those electrical impulses. Now, the neuroglias are essentially going to be support pieces. So we have these astrocytes here, our glia cells here, things like that. And again, they're supposed to help and aid within those electrical impulses. So again, our nervous tissues, the main job is just to send, transmit, and receive electrical impulses. All right, and that actually is going to complete or conclude our lecture on the three remaining types of tissues. So what I want you to do now is I want you to go ahead and give the test your knowledge portion a try. I'm going to give everybody a couple seconds to pause the video, and do them, and then we'll go ahead and look at them together in just a second. All right, welcome back. So let's go ahead and take a look at these questions. For number one, it says, which of the following tissues is primarily found in skin? So in this case, it is going to be the epithelia. Remember, connective tissues are going to connect things together and support them. Nervous, their main job is to send electrical impulses. Muscles for contractions. So in this case, the epithelial are going to be linings. So those are going to be found primarily in the skin. Number two, a substantial amount of non-living extracellular material, also known as the matrix, characterizes all of what? In this case, it is going to be our connective tissue. Number three, what properties do all muscle tissues have in common? Select all appropriate answers. Every single type of muscle is going to have the ability to relax, and they're also going to have the ability to contract. So whether they're going to be striated, not striated, whether they're going to have many nuclei, whether they're going to be voluntary or involuntary, every single type of muscle is going to have the ability to contract and relax in order to elicit a movement. What type of cells are located in bone tissue? In this case, it's going to be osteoblasts. Remember, this you could have found in the table for our connective tissues. Blood is an example of what type of tissue. It is a connective tissue. Remember, in order to be considered connective tissue, it needs to be able to connect tissues and support them. And then the erythrocytes are cells located in the adipose tissue, which is a type of connective tissue. All right, and that is going to conclude this lecture for this week. So again, if you do have any questions, comments, concerns, please feel free to reach out. And again, make sure you're doing the learning activities and make sure you are preparing yourself for the quiz. I will see everybody in the next lecture.